Welcome to the Spiritual Sauce Show with Valerie Medina and Christine Boshin. In this episode, Valerie and Christine explore spirituality and the various ways that they, as well as you, can connect with spiritual source. Welcome. All right, so as we get started today, let's go ahead and just get settled in and set our intentions. So, starting with feeling where we are sitting down and noticing our feet on the ground, noticing our breath, taking a moment to take a deep breath. And let's lean into our feet, leaning forward and noticing the weight transferring into our feet. And leaning back with our attention on our shoulders. Just noticing what it feels like to be in this body at this time. Tuning in to each other and to our community over the wavelengths that we call YouTube. And with that, I'd like to invite the two of us to set our intentions, and then those of you who are listening to take a moment to set yours. So, Valerie, did you want to start with your intentions today?
It is my intention to share information with the world, with my small corner of my world, and talk to people and broaden their minds, open up their minds to the possibilities of connecting with spirit and the endless love of the collective. And I want people to just be relaxed and open to hearing what our message is.
My intention for this particular session is to listen and explore together, you and me, in a way that we are starting to share some knowledge from our own journeys, and also inviting those who are listening to explore with their own sense of purpose and connection, and take what resonates and leave the rest.
Good.
Thanks. So before we started the recording button today, we were talking about what we're talking about today. And you mentioned it would be great to explore Spirituality 101.
Yes.
So why don't you get us started?
So it was my intention or my idea around spirituality 101. What does that mean? You can live a lifetime that ebbs and flows, and there are certain times in your life when you may feel pretty low and you begin a prayer practice,
Hmm.
or you promise God, please, God, if you just let me stop throwing up, I promise I won't drink again.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You
Right.
know, one of those last minute prayers that you make when you're sick or something like that. And I just had, when I think about it, when I think about my own spiritual journey, I think about that it has come about uh, in not in a conscious level, but in an ebb and flow and throughout my entire life.
Hmm.
And when I realized that, I thought to myself, well, that other people must also experience it that way too, and maybe they're just not realizing or cognizant that they've always had a connection to their ancestors, their
Hmm.
guides,
Hmm.
their own inner wisdom and their soul. And I would I would like to help illuminate that
Hmm. Yeah,
with
and
this spiritual 101 uh,
the
subject.
Spirituality 101, and
Yeah,
it reminds me of when you and I first realized, hey, we've got something we're supposed to do here together, right? We're supposed to
right.
bring this show to the world together.
Yeah.
And I asked you about your intention. I remember you saying something along the lines of to to help people, to help demystify the mystic, right? To help normalize the spiritual. And so this is very much a conversation along those lines of dissecting a little bit where some hidden in plain sight spiritual practices might be in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you just mentioned a couple of them. It's like when we hit a low point or when we realize that we need to make a change, but we need help to make a change, we might throw out that prayer or that call. And so you were mentioning a couple of examples of that. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about like if those ones where you've made a call of that sort, did you see like the response that came back, the spiritual help and support that came back after you made those calls out for prayer or for support through the tough times?
Um, Not directly, but what I remember about making the act itself
Mm-hmm.
of making the prayer, making the call, um, writing in my journal, all the different practices that I've done different times in my life. The act of that itself was what the fact that I was doing something for myself in that way. Um, it's not so much that I felt desperate, but rather that as I began that practice of saying the prayer,
Mm-hmm.
um, that in and of itself was soothing.
Right.
Um, you know, I didn't stand there and go, I'm waiting for an answer. I didn't do that, but it was the act of making the prayers, or maybe if I said the rosary, or I'm a Catholic, but not a practicing Catholic. But there are certain things in the Catholic faith that I occasionally rely upon, and I didn't know that those were ways necessarily of actually connecting with spirit. You know,
And
I didn't connect prayer with being prayerful with actually connecting with my guides, my ancestors, the Virgin Mary, the Holy Spirit. Oh, I didn't I didn't necessarily feel, I don't know, feel that connection. Um, but it was the act itself that made me feel comforted.
which is, I think I'd love to just break that down a little bit with you and get to the like if we were to look at the components of what that is, like if we could distill what that is, regardless of, you mentioned you've got a Catholic tradition, your own faith is a Catholic faith, but what about a Hindu? What about a Jew? What about um, a Native American practicing their own uh, traditions, or even an atheist? So if we take like a full spread across the globe of the different spiritual traditions we might find ourselves coming from, or even someone who says I don't come from a tradition, or maybe I've decided to reject the tradition that I did come from, there seems to be an act that you're describing, and if I can listen reflectively, you can tell me whether I'm hearing it and picking up on it. Something about asking, so there's a voicing, so if you're praying,
Yes,
there's like it's coming out of your windpipe
right.
through
Or,
your
or, or,
lips, so
or sometimes but sometimes it's your inner voice.
your inner voice.
Right. But it's it's not just that religious connection. You also connect through doing. So through cooking, crocheting, dancing. I especially connect with spirit in dance when my whole body responds to music and there's a give and take between the music and I really feel, and I've always said this, my body is an instrument. You
Wow.
know, I interpret the music.
So okay. I'm gonna
So I
catch
mean,
I'm catching up with you, so I'm still back at, so like if there's the prayer, which is the invocation or the request.
mhm,
So it could be like if you're an atheist, if one is an atheist, it could be just saying, that part of me that has this dialed in on a higher level, like maybe my subconscious, my unconscious, that part of me that has more perspective than I have at this particular moment, or maybe even me of tomorrow or something like that. But there's uh, an, an asking there, or even asking oneself to focus, or asking oneself to do better, or asking God or angels or whoever we're asking. So it's this act of asking, but then now we're moving on to an act of receiving and flowing. And so you're talking about dance, you're talking about art, you're now receiving, and the spirit is moving through you, is what I'm hearing.
Creation.
You're
Creation.
creating, there's
Yes.
cooking, so there's the spirit is coming through you, through all of us, through the act of creating.
Yes. Musicians, artists. For me, the act, and I can remember my grandmother telling me that it is, you show more love when you make something yourself.
Mm-hmm.
She crocheted and knitted, but I don't know, when she told me that, so it was like making a homemade card, something
Mm-hmm.
as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
So that transmuted love.
Mm-hmm.
So, and to me, that's a spiritual connection. Whenever you are communicating love, that's a spiritual connection.
And you talked about food, and I'm sure that those of us, and I'm hoping all of us who have had someone in our lives that has cooked with love, you
Yes.
don't forget those meals. You just don't
No,
forget those meals. I'm
no.
thinking of a dear friend of mine who passed like a week and a few days ago, and I can remember Christmas and Thanksgiving dinners at her house. I can specifically tell you what she fed me, like in
Wow.
1976. You know, like when you have been nourished at that level, it gets to your heart somehow. The So
Yeah,
I agree with you. The handmade cards, or did you make Valentine's when you were a kid on
I
Valentine's
did.
Day? So there's different ways that I'm hearing that we connect with spirit in a
Hmm.
very practical, everyday kind of a way, whether it's invoking a prayer. You mentioned writing in your journal too, and something I think there's something very special about journal writing, because it's writing for yourself and yourself only, right? It's I mean,
Yeah.
we can share from our journals, and in some ways that might be the distinction between a journal and a diary. And yet
Hmm.
taking that moment to be reflective, to I think also to slow yourself down, or to slow ourselves down. Often when we're writing in a journal, it's by hand, it's not at a computer or a typewriter, right? Well, who has typewriters anymore? But it's slowing down, and it's the physicality of the connection of the thought to the paper or the document.
And I have consciously practiced writing down a question
Hmm.
and waiting for the answer to come and then writing down what I feel, hear, sense, or whatever. That's a really good way to connect with spirit, with your own soul wisdom, um, is to wait for something to come. I mean, that, like I said, when I pray, it's funny, I don't wait for an answer. I just blah, 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 blah.
But a prayer, but I think, and I've heard someone else describe the difference between praying and channeling
Hmm.
is
Mm.
to pray is to request, to channel is to listen and receive.
Hmm. Oh, yes.
So it's a conversation,
Yeah, yeah.
and an exchange.
And that's the same with journaling. You're writing down and then you're waiting to hear. And there's a very good author, Neil Walsh.
Hmm.
He's got three names.
We
Something
can
Neil, David Neil Walsh or something like that.
we'll
He
find him
wrote,
and put him in the show
yeah,
notes. Yeah.
he wrote Conversations with God.
Hmm.
And he was at a very low point in his life. He had just broken up with a girlfriend, a long-term committed relationship, and he just was so upset with God.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
he started writing all these things about how he was so mad and blah blah
Hmm.
blah.
Hmm.
And so what happened was he started getting answers from God. And so
Wow.
he's got this trilogy of books, to where once he slowed down and realized this was coming from God,
Hmm.
he started writing down the answers, and he was able to really, the books are broken down into three phases: personal questions for himself, like,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then things that a human being goes through, an individual,
Hmm.
then the world,
Hmm.
and then the other one was a spiritual realm. So
Yeah.
he asked all these any groups of questions about things that if you could have a conversation with God, what would you what would you ask him?
And
So
that speaks to me about two important concepts that come into my mind when it comes to the practice of spirituality in general. So as children, we all have active imaginations. And in our culture, our predominant culture and society these days, we tend to teach it out of ourselves or
yes,
out of our youngsters at a certain point.
we diminish it as being untrue. And
Right.
then you get to be an adult and you learn how to manifest.
Right, right, right.
And what is that, right?
Right. So we to say to be spiritual or to have these conversations is to go back to believing one's own imagination. So there's that. But then also to say, this was a three-part realization actually, also to say the importance of discernment through the heart. And so as any one
Mm,
of us are receiving spiritual information, you and I were just talking before we started recording about a channeling session that I did for you. And you were mentioning, there were some parts of it that I didn't understand. And it really gets to the importance of always filtering whatever information is coming through your own sense of, does this feel right to me? Do I understand it? Does it come with a sense of clarity? Does it come with a sense of recognition? Does it come with a sense of light and support and
mhm.
truth? And so you were mentioning some physical sensations that you have when you recognize truth. For me, and I'd love to hear you describe them. For me, I don't know that I get that often a physical sensation, but I do just know when something feels right, and I know when something
Mm,
feels wrong, and that might be more in my gut, but or I maybe in my shoulder blades. I But I can tell when I feel awash with light, and I can tell when I don't. And so, just to say, for each one of us, we need to pay attention to our own indications and trust ourselves
yes,
when it comes to spiritual connection.
yeah.
So, and then the last one was and you had mentioned this before too. Um, what is it? What is the oneness? Like, how do we, how do we even get these messages? Like, how do we have the capacity to reach to different realms? And that gets back at that we're all really parts of the whole.
Yeah.
So anyhow, those were the three things to just trust the imagination is real, right? Trusting
Mhm.
and discernment, trusting your own inner judgment. And then we're all connected. We're all connected.
Yeah. And I think the thing to keep in mind about imagination um is that if we are if we create our own, you hear a lot about quantum physics for one
Hmm.
thing,
Hmm.
and the ideas of creating your own reality.
Hmm.
So people who are CEOs and things like that, and really big earners, making things happen. Um, they're creating their own reality and surrounding themselves with other people who are um, also creating their own reality. What is that? That is imagination. I mean, you have to. Imagination is the seed that 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 everything grows from, right?
Yes. And I think also you're touching on the importance of community because you and I have been on a spiritual path for a long time, each of us individually.
Mm-hmm.
And our spiritual path led us to encounter each other, and there was some intention setting that we both had been doing before we met each other that would lead us to each other. And there's something really important about being in community because we verify each other's contexts, right? So
Mm.
so you're talking about a corporation. Well, I happen to have a job at a corporation, so I can relate to that concept, and I can relate to there being a a context and a culture that we do our work within. There's a certain workflow that goes into being in business, and there's a certain etiquette, and there's a certain type of work that we do. And so there's reality that is constantly reinforced by each other.
Yes.
And so I think one of the other important goals that you and I have is to reinforce spiritual reality as an agent of change and healing, and support mutual support for the human collective, for the life on earth collective, uh, is has a lot to do with talking about and picking up on, oh, you've had that experience, I've had a similar experience. Oh, okay, because
Hmm.
then you've got data points. So if you're thinking about a straight line, or no, one single point of light, let's say, how do we say that we can believe in that point of light? Well, it's a little bit hard, but what if you have a second point of light? Well, now there's some comparison. What if you have 3 points of light and now they all line up in a line? There's more data. And so the more that we talk about our individual experiences, the more points of data we share with each other in a way that we can then help each other find our way. Even
Hmm.
though your way is your way, my way is my way, everyone who's listening, your ways are all your ways as well. And yet we can shine light on each other's paths by sharing our experiences.
Yeah, and that's the wonderful thing about having a realization that maybe throughout your life you've been experiencing signals, communication,
Yeah.
love from your ancestors, from your grandmother who passed, who leaves dimes, or
Does your grandma leave dimes?
no, my mother leaves dimes and feathers
Dimes and
in the
feathers.
oddest places.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I have little stories, but they, yeah. So I think that, or there's or there can be times when you connect with an individual when you hey, you just meet this person, you feel like you've known them all your life.
Mm. Hmm.
They feel so comfortable, or maybe you finish their set, you're so close to them, you finish their sentences. So we are connected to the spirit on the other side and the spirit within to each other. So I, I think that what what I would like people to understand is there's many ways to connect, and there's no there's so many different ways that they're so individualized, and I would encourage people to keep connecting because that's where um you can draw on the most love you can get in your life is from within, and not from without so much, but from
Well, I
within if
guess
you keep going within.
if you keep going within, and also like we are also going without, but I guess there's it's and how do we actually even describe this? Because even if we have close relationships, like our family relationships, our loved ones, our friends, we are connecting and it is support. And yet there's something about this invoking spirit, which is invoking, and I don't really like to use the word higher or lower, but maybe outside of and beyond our current grasp, that we can go octaves beyond where we are, in a way that we are supported octaves beyond where we are. And so, you were talking about we can be connected to people on the earth plane. Well, for example, for the last week, I've been thinking about my friend Rachel, and oh, I really should reach out to my friend Rachel. And then Rachel emailed me tonight. It's like, so Rachel's also thinking of me, right?
Right.
And you were mentioning your mom leaves dimes. My dad sends bluebirds. So,
Mm.
and he in his lifetime was very spiritually connected to bluebirds. It built many bluebird boxes. He was a carpenter and a member of the Audubon Society, and built nesting boxes for bluebirds. And so he will often send bluebirds to me. And I'm trying to think if there's other, and also, even just when you're thinking about your grandma, or you're thinking about your parrots, I've been thinking about our parents today a lot. Today is November 1st, so it's All Souls Day, Dia de los Muertos, a day that a lot of us celebrate our connection to our loved ones who have passed on. And even just when you're thinking of them, that is spiritual connection. When they pop into your head, when you miss them, when you imagine that they're with you, all of that is spiritual connection.
Yeah. Well, today's All Souls Day and tomorrow is Dia de los Muertos.
Thank you for clarifying for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Um, non-Catholic here. I have a kind of a loose familiarity with yesterday was Halloween, but so
Right.
today is All Souls and tomorrow is Dia de los Muertos.
All ways to well, and Dia de los Muertos kind of came about, well, was always practiced by the indigenous um people, but it also was practiced underground and around the same time of All Souls Day. So it was a
Mm,
way to get around the the oppressed Catholicism, the oppression of Catholicism. So
right, and I would say that's true here in the Americas and also in Europe. It's the indigenous worldwide indigenous recognition of the turning of the seasons.
yes, yes, that too. Yeah, yeah. Okay, Christine. So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What, in your lifetime, what's the earliest s- spiritual practice you can think of, um, or spiritual connection that you ever had in your life?
Oh, I have a couple of them that come to mind immediately. No, I have it's more than a couple. I'm going to just kind of tell you some vignettes that weave together.
Okay.
So, like so many of us, I was raised within a religious tradition. I grew up going to the congregational church. That was an every Sunday event in our family. And to give some context, the Congregationalists were the Pilgrims. They were the
Oh,
the religious group that came over on, that first set of boats from England to these lands. So it's a church that has mostly developed in America, in the United States. So grew up going to church, and as such, I learned Christmas carols. Um, and so I remember um, being awake past my bedtime with a flashlight under my covers, singing Christmas carols and church hymns.
oh,
And, like if you think about making a joyful noise, like that was what I was doing. I was praying through
yeah,
song and I was
yes,
connecting
yes.
through the church songs that I had been taught.
Can I ask
And
you a little question?
yeah,
Did you ever cry when you sang certain songs? Did they make you
yes, we'll get to
emotional?
that. We'll get to that. So I'm talking more like right now we're talking like
How
five
old were you?
five to
Okay,
7 years old, probably
okay.
somewhere in there. But when we get to 12 and 13, then we started crying, listening to songs. That could have been puberty, but that was probably also some spiritual connection. But I'll get to that in a moment. So I I I I felt a deep connection to the sacredness around Christmas Eve and church service,
Hmm.
and how it is where the candles are lit and there's songs that are sung, um, with candlelight. And so I was connected to the ritual of church around Christmas time, and I think that that is definitely tying into an ancestral connection that I have, and as a soul journeying through different lifetimes of practicing faith through Christianity. So there was that connection there. But I think the time I also feel like I did see Santa Claus, and as a 51-year-old adult, I actually think maybe I did still see Santa Claus and his reindeer on the roof across the street, the house across the street from us. I looked out and I saw lights and I felt that I saw Santa Claus. So there's something about connecting to the spirit of Santa Claus, to the joyful vibration of Santa Claus, that when you are a child, there's not the filters on your imagination. And so that felt very
Yeah,
real to me.
yeah.
Um, Growing up into a slightly older child, I was at summer camp in a forest, and it was a church camp, and we were sent out every day for a 15-20 minute meditation, just to go out into the woods, find a spot. And that was the first time in my life that I felt a very palpable presence that I named God at that point in time. I feel God around me. I feel I'm in the presence of God. And, others might use the word the Holy Spirit to describe that awareness and sensation. And
Mhm.
now as an adult, I'd say the trees were holding a sacred vibration, that the forest itself was vibrating with sacred life. And God, we're all God. And the more that we are connected with nature, the more that we are in sacred places, the more that we can sense and feel this. So, being outside, being in nature has always been part of my spiritual connection. But you asked me about songs and crying. There was a time when I was about 12, 13 years old where I was starting to remember a past life in which I had died around that same age. So I was getting past life memories that were tapping into my end of life at that most recent lifetime. So I had died most recently
How were
around
you
the age.
tapping into that? Through dreams, or
Well,
how was that
emotions,
coming to your consciousness?
it's so interesting. It came like how like when there's lightning and thunder. So like if you're standing right there where the lightning strikes, the lightning and thunder, you're going to experience it
Oh,
simultaneously,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Not that I would wish that on anyone, but you can imagine like it's happening all at once. But the
yeah.
further away you get from that place that the lightning struck, you're going to see the lightning before you hear the lightning.
Right.
And so I have noticed that when we remember events, whether it's in a past life or even in this current life, if they are an event that was traumatic, the wavelengths separate out. So we get the emotional memory at a different time than we get the actual visual memory. And so it was coming to me in bits and pieces. And so this particular song evoked this sadness in me, this sense of loss, this sense of grief. And it was a popular song on the radio at that time in the mid 80s or early 80s, whenever that was. And it just made me cry every time I heard it. And so then as these wavelengths were starting to coalesce and I was getting more of the actual details, I think it took me probably 10 to 12 years to actually get the full sense, to integrate the full sense of that what that lifetime was.
How did you get it out? How did you come to understand it? Did you write it out,
I had
or
some
did you?
help. I had some help. So, and
Oh,
I
okay.
think, and I think, you know, another topic that hopefully we'll touch on in this conversation this evening is how to seek spiritual support. Like who is your spiritual support team and how do you find them and what do
Right.
they do for you?
Yeah.
I think that we all have these innate abilities to connect with spirit and to connect with ourself in a more holistic way, like to connect with our other lifetimes, whether they're past or, I'm not even sure that time is
Yeah.
actually linear, but we have the capacity, but we also need help. We also need support. So I had a teacher, I think I mentioned her the last time we were talking, actually, Michelle, who helped me with past life regression. And um, it wasn't even, and it was actually, there were more than one past life that I was remembering at that particular time in my life. There was an ancient Egyptian past life, and there was a just back in the 1950s and 1960s past life, California
Oh, very
past life.
recent.
Very,
Oh,
the one that's most recent to this one. So
right.
I had some of the mix match, like they were kind of layering over each other, these two past lives that I was remembering, and I had died young in both of them. And so um, there were recurring dreams about being frightened of mummies that I had since I was a very tiny child. So there was like an awareness and visions, like waking dreams, like a dream when you're asleep, that's a dream, but then there's visions that are waking dreams. So there were
Right.
so Michelle helped me by actually, she had the skill set, has the skill set to hold protective space around someone while helping them do a regression. And so that is very much about, very much like what you do, Valerie, where it help the meditation, the hypnosis meditation, where you guide someone through what they are seeing, and you do so in a protected way. And
Right.
so she did that with me, and then so there were two past lives that I remembered, and it's been decades now that I'm remembering like the sequence of which memory came first, but I know that between the age of 12, 11, 12, 13, and 1920 that I was piecing
Mm.
together quite a lot of those two past lives. So, um, yeah, so the visual memory, the storyline, the awareness of place, like, okay, Egypt, Central California, coastal California, like, who were my family members? What was the circumstance? What was my emotional experience? What was my mental experience? And then, very importantly, what is the healing that I am being asked to bring to this in this memory at this point in
Right,
time in my current life? There's always a healing. There's always a putting back together of the pieces that scattered apart. So
right,
making whole. And so there were lessons that came through. Yeah. So as a child, I was very spiritually connected. I did at some point have a split between sourcing myself spiritually through my church versus through my own
mm,
personal direct connection. And
hmm,
that happened pretty much in the woods that day at camp, where I had that direct sensation of the Holy Spirit, that direct sensation
right,
of God. And then from that point forward, I became a seeker. And so I remember I'm going through the confirmation process or the baptism process, confirmation process in the church, and expecting it to be like a comparative religion course. Like I was expecting our minister to actually say, well, before you decide um, to get not baptized, confirmed in the congregational church, let's just have a view of where else you could go and what else you could understand, and what other spiritual traditions there are out there. My own church didn't do that for me, but my friend Kim, who was a member of the Methodist church in our neighborhood, invited me to her youth group where they were doing that. They were doing that. They invited in a Native American shaman to talk to us. They took us to the Hare Krishnas, and we danced with the Hare Krishnas in one of their ceremonies. So they were giving their youngsters a chance to experience God through other eyes, right? The
right,
God through
right.
other human contexts. And for me, that was absolutely necessary, nourishing, helpful. And I wish I could call Kim and be like, hey, listen to our show. But you know what? I should, because Kim has passed the spirit already. We should just invite Kim. Kim, you must be with
Help
us right now. I love you so much. Thank you for being such an incredible, wonderful friend in my young life. And
and
yeah,
teammate here
and
too.
teammate here, and teammate here.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I became a seeker, and I think that that's really important. Is that we should all constantly come back to our own sense of discernment and our own path, because even though we are all part of the whole, the amazing beauty of it is that we each have our own unique paths. And so even within a church context, for example, you mentioned being Catholic, I mentioned growing up in the congregational church. There's no two congregationalists that are the same. There are no two Catholics that are the same. Like everyone's
Hmm.
experience is different. Everyone's connection to spirit is different.
And I think that sometimes life circumstances will make us, um, you know, some people speak of dark night of the soul,
Mm, yeah,
or have you have a particular challenge in your life, your child or your loved one is sick.
yeah,
Well, then you sometimes people, you know, religion is a foundation of their rock, right?
right.
But sometimes people turn away from God, and God as God can't isn't doing anything for them.
Mm,
So they do not, and I don't quite understand, when you turn away from God, then you can still seek God in humanity.
yes, and I think it's interesting. I feel like at this point in humanity, there's quite a lot of collective self reflection on the good and the bad of established religion as structures to support spiritual growth and healing and
Yeah,
connection to
yeah.
God. And I think for you and I both have expressed in this just one conversation that there's aspects that we take and there's aspects that we leave of our own religious traditions, right?
Mhm, mhm,
And to allow there to be flexibility where the Bible isn't necessarily only Bible, like in terms of not being the only holy book, that the holy book is also your own channeling, your own journaling, your
mhm.
a book you find on a bookshelf that just calls you to that corner of the room and you pick it up and you open it up and and there's something you needed to read. That that the sacred is constantly inventing itself again and again. Life is the spiritual is constantly creating life again and again and again, over and over and over again, and in the miracles in front of us all the time. Like this morning the sunrise was different than yesterday, and like right now I'm sitting with a plant friend who my husband brought home from work because it was in his office, but he's not really there anymore so much. And so I have this new plant friend here with me, and I'm just admiring the miracle of my plant friend, just the life that this plant, like, we're sitting here in the same room. I'm a miracle of life, and so is Yucca. you know like we're spirit incarnate.
Right, right. Um, and yeah, and I've heard that said over and over again by great channels like is it Suzanne Weiss Geisman, yeah. She talks about, each one of us having this a drop of God in us,
We do.
and 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 then we have the ability to see that in each other too
We
and
do.
connect with that. So whether we're connecting with what we think of as God, um, in heaven, our
Mm,
create our what
mhm.
we create as a heaven, or we think of God as within us, and in our own divinity,
And
in our
isn't
own magic.
sorry to
That's a
interrupt you.
loaded word.
Well, and when we get to unpack on some other session, we can go deep into that one.
Yeah.
Um, Sorry to interrupt, but what you were saying reminds me of, if I am understanding the translation correctly, to say namaste is to recognize the sacred and the holy and the God spark within the other,
Oh, yeah.
right?
That's beautiful.
It
Yeah.
is. What an incredible greeting to just right there
Yeah.
and hello to be able to say, I recognize your God spark.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And that's true regardless of, connecting with another human being, or those of us who have pets, connecting with an animal,
Oh, yeah.
connecting
Oh, the
with it
most unconditional, beautiful love coming from
from
dogs,
animals.
especially. And not some cats too, but
Dogs are so effusive with their
yeah,
connection,
yeah,
and they're
yeah,
they're so
yeah,
generous with it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Cats can be too, and all of us can be in our own ways.
yeah.
So pause the conversation for a moment.
Hmm. It's fine.
We have another question we're going to ask each other, and I'll start by asking you, Valerie,
Okay.
how can we enhance our connection to spirit?
Well, in the last couple of years, I know that I have developed, actually, last couple of months, to tell you the truth. It started out in spits and sparks. Um, I started a meditation practice, um, but it really got underway, I would say, in June.
Hmm.
And it started off with 5 minutes a day. I found a little mindfulness thing on YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and I would just concentrate on my breathing. It would take me through just to focus on the in and out of breathing for 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is it centers you into the now.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, that's pretty important because,
Right.
we're so busy with our mind all over the place. Even when I try to, even there are some days that I'm not successful with my meditation, or what I think of as successful, but at least I
Mhm.
did it.
Right.
But my mind is all over the place, and I've constantly got to go, oh, I don't want to think about work. Let me go back to this breathing.
Yeah.
And now I found some wonderful meditations on YouTube. I have one that is a beautiful, just it sounds like angelic voices, to tell you the truth.
Mm,
It starts off with a bell, and
mm,
then it's this beautiful angelic singing, and it
mm,
ends with a bell, and it's only 15 minutes long.
mm,
And so what I do is I get up, I prop up my pillows, I
mhm,
go start my coffee,
mhm,
and I get a glass of water, bring it back. I
mhm,
keep the what do you call it? The lights low, so I just have my lamp by my bed, and then I just do my meditation in the morning, and then when I'm done, I go get my coffee and start my day. But it's just 15 minutes that I'm setting aside for myself,
mm.
with myself, in honor of myself, that I just don't do it in any other way. And um it has and then on the weekends I do 30 minutes, or sometimes I've done an hour, and oh my goodness, I feel so relaxed.
It helps, right?
It really does.
So meditation can mean so many different things. And so you've been
Yes.
just describing focusing on the breath. There's so many different meditation
Yes.
practices out there. And here in the East Bay, there's meditation centers, like or in the San Francisco Bay Area, there's quite a lot of communities that one could go to learn how to meditate and to
Yeah.
quiet the mind. So quieting the mind can happen through listening to music. Quieting the mind can happen through focusing on the body and the body's movements.
Like in
There's
yoga.
yoga. Yeah, I do a form of meditation that grew for me out of sampling various different types of somatic practices. Is another word for that. Like what I do, we call it gravity meditation, and it's focusing on the just paying attention with the mind's eye to gentle movements that change the center of gravity, and just noticing like if I'm over here, that feels different than being here, and I'm here. If I'm not thinking about things, I'm just here. But what if I'm here?
Right.
Or what if I'm there? And just noticing, oh, that's different. Yeah, it's different for my ear. It's different for my shoulder. It's different for my foot. Bringing awareness out of
Into
the
the
clutter of
body.
the mind
Right.
into the body. And then from there might be into the emotions. There's different things that we become aware of, but it's also carving out intentional time.
Yeah.
So there's a certain sense of a ritual or of a the words that came to me were sacred container. So sacred can be a weighted word, but it's like you just said, another way of describing that is it's my time for me. It's my time for me with me. And it's the only time
Yeah.
that I have like that. So you're setting aside this intentional time, which is not it's not part of the daily routine of survival, right? The daily routine of work in order
Responding.
to responding.
Responding, putting out a fire, waiting for someone else to do something, or I mean, there's sitting in traffic.
All of those moments where you're waiting and sitting could also become meditation moments. It's like in terms of there's an intention that you're setting by saying I am going to focus on my breathing, or I am going to focus on this angelic music, or you know what I'm saying, that there's an
Yes.
intention and
Well,
a setting aside of
and
that
and
time.
and I also use that time sometimes during my meditation. I call them hits,
Yeah.
spiritual hits,
Hmm.
or pieces of wisdom. I may be struggling with a particular issue,
Hmm.
and an answer comes through for me, and so I keep pen and paper to write down what it is that I
Hmm.
got in my meditation.
Hmm.
So and then the other kinds of meditation I do are I do violet flame meditation,
That's a
which
good
is
one.
focusing on the healing elements of violet flame promoted by Saint Germain, who was a person who lived a long time ago, but who lived many lifetimes. And I don't even know how to explain Saint Germain, but
I don't either, but I know of Saint Germain and I know of the
the
violet
violet flame,
flame meditation of transmutation,
yes.
right?
And that's
That's
what he does. He takes, or the violet flame takes a problem or worry and transmutes it into love. And I've actually been practicing that for my family,
hmm,
for people that I want better a better relationship with, better
hmm,
communication with.
hmm, hmm,
And I have to say, I have to report back that it has worked, and
right.
seriously used it this last week. And I noticed an immediate difference in the way that this other person was communicating with me.
We're all energy. Besides all being connected, we are all energy. And when we put that prayer, and so I think what's really quite amazing about the violet flame is it's a very visual example of how we can take what we're struggling with in our current configuration of consciousness and give it up to the higher, where we say, we know you're violet, we know you're a flame, we're going to imagine putting this problem into you, we're going to imagine that you are burning this problem, but we don't know any more about it than that. Like it's
Right,
past our way of conceiving of reality, and yet it comes back to us in these beautiful transformations that we prayed for, that we
right,
spent that time, that physical time, whatever that was, your 15-minute timer, your 30-minute timer, your hour timer, engaging in that focus of taking the issue and putting it into the flame, of taking the issue and putting it into the flame, and continuing to hold that image of the violet flame.
hmm. My favorite part of that particular meditation is imagining the violet flame where my heart is.
Mm,
And it
yeah,
provides so much love, comfort, and just overall well-being in my body. And I just kind of imagine it going up and down my chakra column,
right.
just kind of cleaning out any of the stuck energy that I might have. Just that visualization is so complete and gratifying to me, and relaxing. And
And it's
I
interesting that
don't,
you're
I,
talking
yeah.
about cleaning out your heart because actually just this Monday, like 2 days ago. So another thing that I do is I ride my bike to work like 1 to 3 days a week. It kind of just depends. It ebbs and flows on my schedule, but it's one of the things I do for myself. You know, I could get to work faster. I could drive,
Hmm.
but biking creates that pause in my day, and it also is exercise, and is also a meditative sort of exercise, just in the same
Yes.
way that walking is or running is. It's a there's a rhythm and a repetition to it that gets you in connection with your heartbeat, with your breath. So, and I often channel while I'm riding my bike. And I was praying, I was asking for guidance. You know, how do I get my channeling work out into the world more? What can I do? And they said, today, this is your job. You need to clean out your heart space. And so you were mentioning a violet flame. The image that they gave to me to play with was um, like a cleaning brush, but it was made out of light and there were light bubbles. And so they're saying,
Oh,
just, you know, you're kind of like, just like you might scrub the tile in your bathroom, gently with this cleaning scrubbing brush that's made out of light and has light foamy bubbles, clean out your heart. Notice where your heart needs to be cleaned. And then I focused on my heart and I could see all of this fear and worry and, you know, and kind of like PTSD, to the experiences of life in general, but
block.
that,
Yeah.
you know, that like kind of like holding the world at bay, and oh, but if I gently,
Here.
yeah, if I gently wash that, and then I imagine the light bubbles moving that through, and you were talking about your chakra column. I was also seeing it moving through my chakra column. So all that to be said, there are different images that we can play with that might resonate with us. One day, one image, another day, a different image that can support that process. And light and colors are a part of that. Violet as a particular color, white light as a particular color, that we can see what resonates with us in that particular moment.
Yeah. I also explore my dreams.
Mm,
So when I have dreams that are sticking with me, actually into waking, I try to write down what I remember from them, to try to understand, well, what am I stressing on? What are the things that are coming through? I also do I have some beautiful sets of oracle cards, and when I'm feeling especially um, worried about a particular issue,
mm,
I'll pull one card for the day and read it.
mm,
Um,
mm,
I have uh, Virgin Mary cards,
mm.
and I have some beautiful Mother cards. So I kind of am focused in on that. I think I'm really focused in on being in touch with my inner child,
Mm.
and I I I'm constantly doing things to try and reparent myself,
Right,
um,
right.
to heal the things that happened, in this lifetime. So I'm constantly working on those little healing modalities. I also have what do you call it?
Tapping? You were tapping just
Gems.
now.
I
Oh,
know gems. What do you call it? Stones,
crystals?
crystals. Yeah,
Crystals.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I've played with the energy of crystals,
Mm.
and most nights I sleep with crystals inside my pillow, particular ones.
Yeah, I do that
Um,
too. Right now I'm holding rocks. They're not
oh,
crystals
okay,
per se, but there's crystals inside of them, and
right.
I find uh, great
Comfort.
solace and support from the rock people, as I will call them, and uh, the rock kingdom, the rock nation. Basically that there's energy and awareness in all creation, and that rocks are they exist on this planet longer than we do. They're going to be around before and after we are. And they are elders. And you were talking about ancestors. I think that rocks are also elders. And crystals have a certain resonance and structure and organization to them that reflects and refracts, and focuses light, holds light.
Yeah,
And different crystals do so differently. There's a lot of people whose spirituality is very much focused around understanding the energetics of the mineral kingdom.
hmm, yeah. What other ways do you connect with? Do you focus on your?
And
What
how
do you
how
do for your
how
spiritual?
do I support my spiritual practice? And
Yes, thanks
so
for.
it's like people that are musicians, right? Like a lot of times you hear there's an innate ability, but they practice and practice and practice and hours
Yes,
and hours and hours, and they're
yes,
consistent. And maybe some days they only get a certain amount of time, but there's a coming back to it. There's a coming
yes,
back to it. There's a coming
yeah,
back to it. And so spirituality is that way too. So
yes,
letting yourself start small, and but then making sure that you come back to it when you fall away from it.
yeah.
So I have practices. I was talking about the bike rides and the channeling while I bike, and I start my day most days with a prayer that I learned from a gentleman who practices the Lakota religion, Native American religion.
Hmm.
And this is my interpretation of it. So it's probably not exactly how it comes from his tradition, but I greet the sun in the morning, the rising sun, and I give thanks for my original instructions. So like my spiritual to-do list. And then
Mm,
I turn south and I give thanks for and I recognize the practice of trying, of just going out there into the world and doing. And then I turn to the west and I give thanks for the death process, whether that's the death of a particular day or the death of a family member or my own death or just dying in general, letting go and releasing. And
mm-hmm,
then I turn north and I give thanks for the integration that comes in the dream time, the integration that comes from having lived the life and then learning the lessons from it. And then I look to the heavens and I give thanks for our relations in the heavens, including stars. But also you can think of that as being those that have passed. And then I put my hands on the ground and I thank Mother Earth for Mother Earth's sacredness and the gifts from the earth. And then I sandwich myself between my hands. So I put one hand behind my back and one hand on my heart, and I give thanks for the divine within. And that's my prayer for starting the day.
mm. That's beautiful. That's a
Thank
nice
you.
one.
Yeah.
It's funny how you say you channel when you ride your bike. I
Hmm.
actually channel when I drive my car on my way to
So,
work every day. I take the same way to work. And so I'm driving, I'm paying attention, but I have stuff coming in.
do you record it? Do you have your voice memo going? Oh,
No,
you
I
should
should.
start doing that. Yeah,
I
that's what I
know,
do.
I know.
Like all of our phones. Like this is my iPhone from I finally just this is an iPhone 6 and it pretty much doesn't work anymore, but I just got a
Uh-huh,
new phone. But all of the phones that I've seen have a voice memo. Like because
uh-huh.
I plug in my headphones and my microphone and then press the record button. So then I can load it up to one of these AI transcription services and
Oh,
hear back. There's also traffic. There's also honking. There's also the trucks that pass,
uh-huh.
um, but it does tend to pick it up. And that's a really neat way to use modern technology to capture those moments in time. I think I'd just like to reiterate that we all have access to spirit, although our vocabulary for spirit may be different individual to individual, and
Yeah,
that our goal tonight, I think our shared goal is to encourage our listeners to feel empowered that they do have this access, that it doesn't have to come through another human being, it doesn't have to come through an institution,
right.
that we all have access, and to encourage our listeners to explore, trust, believe, try, repeat, and really enjoy the connection.
Yes. Yeah. I think the big thing to understand is that in connecting with spirit, you are connecting with your own your own sacredness. And n- people don't realize how special they really are.
Mm.
How connected we all are to each other. If we thought that, if we realized that, uh, you know, maybe the world would be better. But
So,
unfortunately, you know,
well, but you know what? You and I can make it better. We just made it better for ourselves and each other, right? Over the past
yes,
hour.
definitely,
And
definitely, yeah,
so we're we're inviting those of you that happen to be watching, listening uh, to receive a message of encouragement from the two of us that you're
yeah,
special. You
yeah,
deserve to give yourself that 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, hour a day, whatever time you're able to carve out to be in support of yourself and
yeah,
to bring out your own unique specialness. That we applaud you.
yes.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Spiritual Sauce Show.